Hey guys, and welcome to this episode of TNCBA's Tips, Tricks, and How-Tos. And in this episode, we're not necessarily going to be technique focused, but Kelsey, I'm going to really focus more on bass behavior and what's kind of going on. As we've gotten into May here, we've talked a lot more about post-spawn and kind of focusing on fish that are around fry garters and stuff. And I really want to take a second here in this episode and talk a little bit about the progressions here. So we've talked about pre-spawn, we had spawn, now we're going into the post-spawn. So what are some things that are going on? Well, during the spawn, as those fish were moving up, you may have heard us mention a couple times, or I know that I've talked to somebody about it on some YouTube comments here, that fish sometimes will be pairing up. And we had some guys that found some fish back in Friendship, and they were rolling, they were bumping into each other, and those fish were in the process of that spawn, and they were pairing up and stuff. And those fish during that time are really hard to get to react to anything. Their mind they're focused on their business, right?
One track mind.
One track mind at that time. So that's what they're focused on. And when you hear us refer to them as pairing up, that's where the male and female are pairing up. They're going to lay eggs. They're going to fertilize. They're going to then sit around the nest for a while until those fish, those small fry, the baby bass hatch out.
Yes.
And that is when we then start to get into that post-spawn. So after that spawn, you've got the fish sitting on the bed. Then we phase into the post-spawn, and this is different for all the fish. You might have waves come up and spawn really quick, and then you're going to have that kind of work its way on out.
Yeah.
You all found fry garters and stuff as late as, what was it last year?
June.
It was early June when we were up on Watauga. So they had just spawned out. The fry had just hatched and stuff. So it hadn't been long since they'd been on the bed. But you've also got some that were spawning back in early April right now. So the spawn extends. So it's kind of different for the fish and throughout the sections of the lake that you're in. I would say
it's different for the species too.
That is true too.
Certain species, different temps, different
phases. They move up there a little bit earlier.
They like to go at different times.
So you've got that spawn, and then we move into the post-spawn when they start to guard that fry, and they start to try to feed back up again as well because they've been up there, they've used up a lot of energy. So as we get into the post-spawn, there's a few things that are going to go on. You're going to have fish that are guarding fry.
Yep.
You are going to eventually have a shad spawn, which I want to talk about in this video. And then eventually we're going to have a bluegill spawn coming. So in this time frame, God knows that these fish need to heal up from what's been going on. So he's going to bring basically the buffet to them.
Yeah.
So these fish that hang around the shallows, they get done with their spawn.
Don't you find it interesting though that these littler fish are trying to move up to do their thing, and they're just becoming an easy target?
It's just like, rude.
They got one thing on their mind, but little do they know their lunch.
Oh yeah, they're getting ready to get eat. So guys, the shad spawn is a really great time, Kelsey, and it's a time of the year that it's fast paced. The bite is quick. But it can also be short-lived too, and it can get tough later in the day. So as you're getting into May, and we're sitting here in May, right around the full moon, Douglas typically, and we'll be talking about some different lakes because it's going to happen at different times based on the lake you're on. But on Douglas, we'll use that kind of as our bookmark here, our bookend. And on Douglas, really the full moon in May is when you can really start to see the shad spawn happen, and it'll continue, and you might have another one at the full moon in June. But they're really going to use those low light periods. So look around the full moon and some things that you're looking for to tell whether the shad spawn is going on. A spinnerbait is a really great way.
Yes, sir.
You throw a spinnerbait out, and you want to be around cover. Okay, we'll get to the cover here in a second. But when you throw
cover tight to the bank.
Tight to the bank, one of the two. But when you throw that spinnerbait out there, if you're working it back in and you see these bait fish rolling all over it and bumping into the blades and stuff, there's a shad spawn going on. Because the way that these shad work is they're using the force of bumping into stuff to knock their eggs out, to fertilize, and to do their business there for their shad spawn. So that's why when Kelsey says you're around cover or you're really tight to the bank, I want to be around something that they're bumping into, something that they can beat into.
And going back to what you were saying, low light conditions, I mean, most of the times that I've ever seen one, it's normally right there at the cusp of daylight.
Yes, the break of dawn.
That's when it really gets active. And then once that sun starts coming up, they start going deeper.
They move back out deeper, and it's gone until the next morning or until maybe later that evening and stuff. So it's very, very key to be around cover where those fish are going to be, that bait fish is going to be pulled up on, whether that be trees, laydowns. Some of the best places are riprap, rock. You're going to find those bait fish. But in the mornings, idle around, run around, look for some areas where you see it going on. And it's just going to look, it's going to be a flash of bait activity flipping and stuff down the bank. And you'll think, per se, that there's fish in there eating. It looks like they're schooling them up, but they're not always in there right in the middle. But that's what those shad are doing in their spawn, is they're beating up against those rocks and they're beating up against those other things as they do their business. And those bass are close by. Some great baits during this time. A jerk bait.
Yep.
A jerk bait is excellent during the shad spawn time. A top water, whether it be a spook or a popar. A spinner bait is awesome around the shad spawn. So these baits, the one thing I will say is this: cover some water.
Yeah.
Move
down those banks.
Move down those banks. Follow those shad. Move around. One thing that I will say, I don't think the hydro wave catches you a million more fish. I don't think it's something that's applicable 24/7, 365 out of the year.
But
this is one time
crazy.
of the year. I've been able to pull into a pocket a little bit later in the day with that thing turned on to shad spawn and stuff, and get them fired back up in that pocket. So a hydro wave can play a big key part here during this time. Boat docks are huge. Okay, they're going to be pulled up around there. So just be thinking about hardcover areas where those fish are going to pull up, those bait fish are going to pull up and do their thing, because those largemouth are going to hang around. When they're done doing their business, they know that these shad are going to be pulling up too, and they're waiting for them. They're waiting for them to come up there and spawn. So you've still got a lot of fish. It is very evil. They're just waiting for these guys to get one-track minds. It's like a deer getting in the rut. Like, they're not thinking about anything else.
They don't care if it's a car running 60 miles an hour its way.
Boom! So that's what we got coming at them. These largemouth and
Love
stuff.
struck, I guess.
That's exactly. They get struck majorly.
Yeah.
But guys, you're throwing a jerk bait. You're going to have a bunch of shad on those hooks and stuff coming through those wads of bait, and they're going to be following that spinner bait. Like I said, those are great ways to see that the shad spawn is going on. But like we said, it's something you need to key in on. So if you're going into a tournament situation and you're out practicing, don't fish. Don't fish. And in my opinion, run around and find places where the shad spawn is happening. Run down these banks, idle down these banks, look for it to be going on. If you don't see it, move on, run to another place. Don't worry necessarily about fishing. The bass are somewhere there close by. Mm-hmm. You'll find them, you'll get them to bite or whatever. You'll know they'll be there. But the key is locating places to go, because if it's an overcast day, you might have a little extra time. But like Kelsey was saying, on these real sunny days, that shad spawn will die off in 30 minutes to an hour. And they'll be
sometimes
gone.
Shorter than that.
And even shorter than that. It just depends. So you've got to be on top of it. When you're going into a tournament situation with the shad spawn, you've got to know exactly where you're going, and you've got to be there, and you've got to maximize that time. So that's why covering water with the spinner bait, with the jerk bait, with the top water, those things are all so critical to you getting the maximum fishability and stuff out of these shad spawns. And a shad spawn could go on in one section of the lake earlier than others, depending on that water temperature. As it's warming up into the 60s and stuff, that upper 60s, you're looking for that shad spawn to be happening. So be thinking about it. As that full moon now is rolling around here in May, be looking around for that shad spawn. I feel like this year's been a little bit slower on things, but
that's the way I've seen it too.
It feels behind, it feels slow, but still be keeping an eye out for that, because before these fish all kind of migrate out to these really deep haunts and move out even deeper, they're going to be hanging around. There's going to be some big fish up there. So you've got those fry garters that are around those spawning areas. They're going to be around cover as well. These bass are going to be guarding them. And then you're going to move into the shad spawn here in May. And as we get on into June and stuff, early June, you're going to have a bluegill spawn that's coming around. And that bluegill spawn, again, those bass are going to be hanging around those bluegill beds and around those areas. So you can fish shallow. I love to go out deep. I love to move out there offshore and stuff. But don't forget and don't neglect, especially in those early morning hours and stuff, things like the shad spawn that are going to keep those fish up shallow. But again, my tips to you, when the shad spawn's going on, especially if you're practicing for a tournament, cover a lot of water, see where the shad spawn's happening, and then capitalize on it on tournament day. You can suck yourself into practicing and fishing that area, but then if somebody's sitting on it and you don't know another good area where the shad spawn's going on, or other places that set up just right, you're going to be out of luck. And if you spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes running around, shad spawn might be done. So the shad spawn is a super effective way to get a lot of bites early in the morning, get some really good bites. Those bass are going to hang around in those shallows, guys, after they're done with that spawn to heal up and feed up. So maximize your time on the water. Find those areas around hardcover, riprap, rock, laydowns, docks, where those shad are going to be spawning, and then get out there with some baits that will help you cover water quickly and maximize that time, because it's a short window, early in the morning, low light conditions. Get out there, bust them quick, get you a quick limit, and then go look for some bigger fish to upgrade later on, guys. Hope y'all enjoyed this tips, tricks, and how-tos. We'll see you on the next one.
Take care.